So last night, one game I got the chance to watch on NBA League Pass was the San Antonio Spurs playing the Celtics in Boston, and Jayson Tatum put up an insane performance for Boston as he dropped 60 points and helped them grab a 143-140 victory in their home arena. However, even despite the Spurs now having lost 2 games in a row following last night's game, I think this team has actually played very well lately, and I'm not sure how well this video will do in terms of views and such, or if anybody cares too much about this Spurs team, but I think it's time we talk about the Spurs and why this team can actually cause some trouble in the 2021 playoffs, and why they're such a dangerous matchup for whoever they face in the 2021 NBA play-in tournament. What's up guys, SCJ here, and if you enjoyed today's video, then make sure to give it a like as it helps out a lot, and if you're new to the channel and or enjoyed the NBA, then make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. So like just mentioned in the beginning of this video, the Spurs have now lost 2 straight games as they lost this extremely close overtime game last night against the Celtics, and 2 nights earlier on Wednesday, they lost another tough matchup against the Heat as they lost by a score of 116-111. Even despite losing 2 straight games though, the Spurs have now won 5 of their last 8, and they've played very well over this recent stretch as they beat the team that now holds the NBA's best record, the Phoenix Suns, and they also beat the extremely hot Washington Wizards as well over this recent run. Beyond that though, the Spurs are averaging the 10th most points per game over their last 8 games, and they've done that on the 11th best field goal percentage in the whole league. They've also shot the ball very well when they've gotten to the free throw stripe, as overall in the season, they've shot their free throws at the 12th best percentage, and over the last 8 games, they've shot the 10th best percentage from the free throw stripe. That's also impressive when you realize they've attempted the 10th most free throws per game this season and the most free throws per game of any team over their last 8 games. This Spurs team has also played fundamental and very clean this season, and the way you can tell is due to the fact that they've averaged the second least amount of turnovers per game and miss out on turning the ball over the least of any team in the league by 0.2 turnovers per game this season. The Spurs are also blocking the 8th most shots per game of any team in the league, and over their last 8 games, they've been drawing the most fouls against their opponents of any team in the league. With just how many free throws they've attempted per game, like mentioned before, that really shouldn't surprise you one bit. Now, overall in the season, the Spurs haven't held their opponents in the bottom 10 spots in any stat category aside from opponent steals per game. However though, they've begun to pick things up over their last 8 games. Over this recent stretch, the Spurs have held their opponents to low shooting percentages as their opponents have shot the 7th worst field goal percentage, the 9th worst 3-point percentage, and even though the Spurs can't defend the free throws, their opponents have shot the worst free throw percentage when the Spurs have sent them to the stripe. Since the Spurs opponents have shot terrible percentages from the field as of late, it shouldn't surprise you that they've averaged the 5th lowest amount of assists per game as well. The Spurs opponents have averaged the 3rd least amount of steals over the last 8 games and the least amount of steals per game overall on the season, which makes sense with the fact that the Spurs themselves have averaged the 2nd least amount of turnovers this season. Over their last 8 games, the Spurs opponents have also averaged the 8th least amount of blocks, despite attempting the 10th most blocks per game. And lastly, the Spurs opponents have averaged the 11th least amount of points per game, and the Spurs narrowly miss out on holding their opponents to the 10th least amount by just 0.1 points per game. The Spurs opponents have also had the 10th worst plus-minus over the last 8 games as well. So great stuff by the Spurs on the defensive side of things, not only over their last 8 games, but overall on the season as well in some of those areas. And lastly, in terms of their defensive stats, the Spurs have had the 11th best defensive rating overall on the season, and they've recently improved to the 9th best defensive rating over their last 8 games as well. And overall on the season, they've held their opponents to the lowest amount of points off of turnovers and the 8th lowest amount of points off of fast breaks also. Then, over their last 8 games, they've actually fell down some spots, as in those categories, they've held their opponents to the 9th least amount of points off turnovers, as well as the 9th least amount of fast breaks of 2. Overall though, their defense has still been solid, as like mentioned before, they've held the 9th best defensive rating over their last 8 games, opposed to their 11th best defensive rating for this entire season. Now, one of the other reasons I think this Spurs team isn't a team that can really be slept on is due to the individual play from their players. The Spurs have had 7 guys averaging double-digit point totals for them this season if we don't include LeMarcus Aldridge, as he of course had to retire after his short tenure with the Brooklyn Nets this season. But another guy it's important to mention is their young guard, Derrick White, as he may not return this season, and that's a huge blow for this Spurs team as he's one of the key players in their young core. However, even without White, they've had 6 players averaging double-digit scoring totals this season, and scoring isn't just the only important thing when it comes to a team playing well, especially with the Spurs team, as you'll see now. This season, DeMar Derozan has really played well, and his play ever since he arrived in San Antonio has really gone under the radar, especially since he hasn't been an all-star in any of the 3 seasons since arriving in Texas. This season, DeRozan's scoring total is down from last year's, but he's putting up career highs in multiple areas, as he's averaged a new career high in assists per game, as well as a career best in free throw percentage too. One other interesting stat is after last night's game, he's now had more 10-plus assist games this season than he did in every season of his career prior to this one. In his first 11 seasons of his career, he had 13 10-plus assist games, and this season alone, he's had 14, which is very impressive. In terms of the great play from the other Spurs players, DeJounte Murray has played great basketball this season, and the other night, in the team's loss to the Heat, Murray made franchise history as he had his 4th triple-double of the season, which is the most by any Spurs player since Greg Popovich began coaching the team in 1996, which is extremely impressive. Beyond just DeRozan and Murray, though, the team has gotten great play from second-year player Keldon Johnson, as he's really flown under the radar in terms of the really good 2019 draft picks. Patty Mills is also playing very well, and he is 0.2 points off of averaging his highest points per game total of his career, and he was averaging the most points per game of his career for most of this season until he fell under the average that he averaged last year. And one guy that doesn't seem to get enough attention is Spurs big man Jakob Poeltl. Poeltl has led the team in rebounds, offensive rebounds, and blocks per game this season, and he's been a very big part of this Spurs team whenever they've been able to find success this year. The Spurs have also gotten solid play and important minutes from their end-of-the-bench players, Trey Lyles, Drew Eubanks, and rookie Devin Vassell. And Vassell has actually started in 3 games this season and the Spurs' last 2 games. So this Spurs team likes to go deep into their roster, and they've gotten great contributions from 9 or 10 different players on their roster in multiple games this season. So this team really operates and plays together like a unit, to say the least. Now, this team does have their struggles, including poor shooting from beyond the arc and some issues occasionally grabbing rebounds among some other things, but this team is of course well coached, as they have one of the best coaches in NBA history on their bench, and they've got a young and hungry core of guys led by a great veteran in DeMar Derozan, helping Greg Popovich teach these guys on the fly. So listen, like I said, I wasn't too sure of how well this video would do in terms of views and whatnot, and if anybody was really interested in the Spurs, but I think the Spurs team is a very underrated group of guys, and one team other Western Conference teams will need to make sure they get ready to play in the 2021 NBA Play-In Tournament if they end up there in a few weeks, which it looks like they will as of right now. Anyway though guys, I want to know what you guys think about the Spurs' level of play lately, their level of play this season, or anything having to do with the team or their players down below in the comment section. Like mentioned before though, if you like this video, then make sure to give it a like as it helps out a lot. And if you're new to the channel and or enjoy the NBA, then make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. That way you stay up to date with my newest content. Anyway though guys, I'm SCJ and I am out. Peace.